welcome to the last event of DOPE 2019, the keynote address by Carolyn Finney.
Woo!
And my name is Brazil, and I'm your conference chair. So we have a few announcements. Which we ask people to do before we get to the keynote. I'm going to try to get through it quickly because I know all of you all have come here to see Carolyn, to hear Carolyn speak. So yesterday I was thanking the different departments and organizations who sponsor DOPE and help to make this conference happen. So from the meticulous records that we keep, I can say that the University of Kentucky Student Sustainability Council, or SSC, has funded DOPE since at least 2013. Now, I believe they may have funded the very first DOPE conference, but I don't have the records to prove that. But today we have a representative from SSC, Sophie Bevan, who's here to just say a few words about SSC.
Hi everyone, my name is Sophie and I'm an undergraduate here at UK studying environmental science. And I'm the Director of Operations for the Student Sustainability Council. So the SSC is a student organization on campus that allocates the environmental stewardship fee. And our mission is to advance the theory, practice, and reality of sustainability here at UK. And so this fee is a $4 fee that all UK students pay, and it generates about $200,000 for campus sustainability projects. And so it generates about $200,000, and in 2017 we distributed our $1 million, so that was really exciting. We've been funding DOPE for several years, and we're always really excited to help fund this conference just because they've really pushed the boundaries on what sustainability means, and they're really accessible to students and everyone, and it's just all around a really great conference. And so I just want to say congrats to all of the organizers who helped make this happen, and thanks to everyone for coming out.
Thank you, Sophie. So funding from sponsors like SSC not only help us with expenses such as printing or paying for vehicles to transport us to our pre-conference field trip sites, but it also helps us to fund our student competitions. So next we'll have Olivia Meyer and Karen Kinslow up here to announce the winners of the SSC-sponsored DOPE 2019 graduate and undergraduate paper competitions.
Oh, hi, I'm Carolyn Finney. I'm a second-year PhD student at the Department of Geography here at UConn.
And we're the undergraduate and graduate paper competition coordinators and the undergraduate symposium. So I'm very pleased to announce the paper competition winners tonight. When your name is called, please stand to be recognized. So, let's see. The winner of the undergraduate paper competition is a double major at Ohio State University, studying environmental policy, decision-making, and physical geography. His paper is titled Conservation from Culture to Politics, Lessons from the Musqueam-Kachiko Management. Please give a warm round of applause for Tal Shutkin.
The winner of the graduate paper competition, a PhD candidate in geography from the University of Minnesota, for his paper entitled Parks, Plazas, and Planters, Homeless Organizing and the Struggle Over Ecological Development. Please give a warm round of applause for Eric Goldfisher.
So thank you all so much, and for everyone who sent on the lookout for an email if you were one of the winners. Okay, thank you so much.
Hold it.
Thank you, Olivia and Karen. Now, we did have a second competition that was thrown together at the very last minute. So the second competition is the DOE 2019 Poster Competition, which is sponsored by the Cultural and Political Ecology Specialty Group of the American Association of Geographers, or CAPE. CAPE aims to promote scholarly activities integrating the cultural, political, economic, and biophysical dimensions of resource use and environmental change. Now, we had planned to announce the winners of the poster competition within 1 week because we wanted to give the judges a chance to look, deliberate, but they actually already made their decision. So, go ahead and announce the winner, or do y'all want to wait until 1 week from now to find out who won? I'll announce it now?
Yeah.
Okay. So if the winner is still here, I do ask you to stand up and be recognized where you are when I announce your name. So the winner of the DOE 2019 poster competition is Emily Goldstein, a master's student from the University of Louisville. Emily, are you here? She's not here. Connecting our community, collaboration, and resource sharing among community gardens in Louisville, Kentucky. So like the paper competition, Emily's going to receive an email within the next week with information about how to claim their award. So before moving on, I would like to recognize the other organizers of this year's conference. If they can please stand and be recognized for all their hard work. Don't be shy. Work with them this year. So next up, we're going to have Dr. Who will introduce Dr. Finney. Dr. Newfont is an associate professor in the Department of History at the University of Kentucky. So her research interests include the U.S. South, Appalachian history, and environmental history. Please give a round of applause for Dr. Newfont.
Thank you, Stephanie, and welcome everyone to what I know is going to be a wonderful afternoon. I really appreciate the invitation to introduce our DOE 2019 keynote speaker, Dr. Carolyn Finney. It's a true honor to introduce her this afternoon. But before I get to that pleasant task, I'd like to take a brief moment to just do two other things. First, I'd like to remind us, as Carolyn habitually does, that this meeting is being held on ground forcibly taken, stolen, from Indigenous people. And I want to respectfully acknowledge the Cherokee and Shawnee people who stewarded this land for generations.
Woo!
And to pay my respect to elders past and present. And you already cheered. I was going to ask you to take a moment to acknowledge collectively both the stewardship and the stealing. Thank you for that. Next, I would like to thank the DOE organizing collective, Stephanie and the whole team for making this year's Feast of Learning and Collegiality possible. And just a quick personal word about this conference, because this is something Carolyn and I have in common. This conference is so lovingly imagined and carried out each year by graduate students. And Carolyn and I have talked about how DOE was for each of us our introduction to the University of Kentucky. I came to Lexington for the first time in 2011 at the invitation of DOE organizers. Carolyn came to UK in 2014 when organizers invited her participation in that year's DOE's plenary session. So she and I met a year and a half later when we both joined the university faculty. And today I'm privileged to count her among my dear friends.
Yay!
There's always that risk when introducing Carolyn. You never know what additions she might make from her seat. But it's worth remembering that we met at Dope. We met Dope before we met each other, and before either of us met the University of Kentucky. So I see that as one of the many signs of the world-making power this conference holds. And so it's fitting today that for our keynote speaker, we have a powerful maker of worlds.
Damn.
But I'm just getting started, Carolyn. Look, I wore the orange boots in your honor. It's very uncharacteristic. All right, so one of the challenging things about introducing Dr. Carolyn Finney is that it's difficult to do her full justice. And I'm going to try, armed with orange boots. So, why? Why is it difficult to do Carolyn justice? We'll try this for starters. Her work is courageous and complex. She is innovator and artist, activist and educator, scholar and traveler and poet and performer and leader and researcher and collaborator and author. Her CV includes a full page of entries that are entitled Synergistic Projects. These are rooted in Vermont, North Carolina, San Francisco, Chicago, DC, and I could go on. All focus on inclusion and diversity. They interrogate power and privilege. They work toward empowerment and justice. The projects include, I give a short list, a program to document diverse undergraduate students' autobiographical conservation stories, an innovative hybrid leadership for sustainability master's program, a multi-year program to create and support public conversation on connections between race and place, an effort to work through questions of power and privilege in a growing university-based natural resource management and environmental justice program, a request to collaboratively create a policy document on diversity in public lands, the Obama administration, and the list goes on. In other words, I can tell you that Dr. Carolyn Finney earned her doctorate in geography from Clark University, that she holds a master's in rural and community development from Utah State University, that she's held faculty positions at Wellesley College, the University of California, Berkeley, and the University of Kentucky. I can note that she has taught invited courses at Meiji University in Tokyo, Japan, and at the Rachel Carson Center in Munich, Germany, as well as the Center for Diversity and Environment in Bern, Switzerland. I can mention her excellent book, Black Faces, White Spaces, Reimagining the Relationship of African Americans to the Great Outdoors, which the University of North Carolina published in 2014. I can let you know that Dr. Finney has been a Fulbright Scholar and a Canon National Park Science Scholar, and that she held a Mellon postdoctoral fellowship in environmental studies. I can share those impressive academic credentials with you, but be warned, they will give you only a glimpse into Dr. Carolyn Finney's larger work. A partial list of the organizations she's recently worked with might help. It reads almost like a poetry of hope. Sustainability Guild International, Active Strategies Outdoor Recreation Summit, Connecting Climate Change to Communities, Spitfire Strategies for Nonprofit Leaders, Women's Outdoor Summit for Empowerment, the Mosaic Project, and my personal favorite, People of the Global Majority Summit, where she was also a keynote speaker. May help to offer the titles of her recent talks, which also read like poetry. All Things Considered, Black Faces, White Spaces, and the Possibility of Us. Desire Lines, on Blackness and Possibility in a Green World. Homecoming, Black Faces, White Spaces, and the Promise of Future Belonging. 10,000 Recollections, Black Faces, White Spaces, and the Land on which we stand. My Father's Hat. Signs of the Time, Righteous Road. The Space of the Possible, Race, Place, and the Politics of Belonging. All that will help us get there. But to help a bit more, let's take a look at how Carolyn introduces herself. Carolyn Finney, PhD, is a storyteller, author, and cultural geographer. The aim of her work is to develop greater cultural competency within environmental organizations and institutions, challenge media outlets on their representation of difference, and increase awareness of how privilege shapes who gets to speak to environmental issues and determine policy and action. Carolyn is grounded in both artistic and intellectual ways of knowing. She pursued an acting career for 11 years, but 5 years of backpacking trips through Africa and Asia, together with experience living in Nepal, changed the course of her life. Motivated by these experiences, Carolyn returned to school after a 15-year absence to complete a BA and MA. Both of these degrees focused on gender and environmental issues in Kenya and Nepal, respectively, and a PhD, which focused on African Americans and environmental issues in the U.S. And then aside, this is now me, not Carolyn, but especially for students in the room, Carolyn asked me to share this multi-layered professional journey story with you. She wants you to know that professional paths take many forms. Often they are winding and non-linear. And I want to add this. If you find your own journeys similarly complex and multiple, please remember, you are in excellent company. So now back to Dr. Finney's self-introduction. Carolyn has worked with the media in various capacities, including the Tavis Smiley Show, MSNBC, and Vice News Tonight. She's written op-eds for Outside Magazine and Newsweek. She was a guest editor and contributor for a special section on race in the national parks in Orion Magazine. She recently participated in a roundtable conversation with REI, the outdoor clothing and equipment company, and the Atlantic Magazine. She's interviewed with various media outlets, including NPR, the Sierra Club Magazine, Boston Globe, and National Geographic. She even filmed a commercial for Toyota that highlighted the importance of African Americans getting out into nature.
Because we need an SUV to do that.
Along with public speaking, writing, consulting, and teaching, she served for 8 years on the U.S. National Parks Advisory Board, which assists the National Park Service to engage in relations of reciprocity with diverse communities. Carolyn is currently working on a number of projects, including a new book of creative nonfiction that explores identity, race, lived experience, and construction of a Black environmental imaginary. Also in progress is a performance piece about John Muir, deliciously entitled, this is my editorial comment, deliciously entitled, The N-Word, Nature Revisited. She has recently published Okay. She's recently published I'm almost done here, and then it's all Carolyn from here on out. Just to wrap up. All right, so I'm continuing with Carolyn Finney's self-introduction. She has recently published a piece for a special issue of Harvard Design Magazine themed Into the Woods, entitled The Space Between the Words, which came out in March 2018, and another article for View, the magazine of the Library of American Landscape History, which appeared in the summer of 2018. She's also been commissioned to write 10 poems for Artists Thrive, an initiative that offers practices, activities, and visions for supporting artists and a thriving artist sector. And so you see, a world maker. And here's the part that makes me sad. In order to meet the demands of this work, Dr. Finney concludes, Dr. Finney has recently resigned from her full-time position at the University of Kentucky. This is me, where she is much missed. Clearly, we are in for a treat today. I deeply admire Dr. Finney's artistry, scholarship, work, and way of being in the world. Please join me in welcoming her back to the University of Kentucky and to this dope keynote stage.
Pasama Kolkwele, Zaina Merkin, and Will Souders. I need to get that right. Come on. It's hot up in this joint. My glasses are fogging up. Woo! I had to just say it. All right. I want to thank you for letting me have a space here today. I really appreciate that. I want to have another shout out to Dr. LaToya Eves for receiving the 2019 AAG Ronald F. Abler Distinguished Service Honors for all the work she's done to grow Black geographies, and by extension, all of us. Of the truth can I say today? Oh, that's what you say now. While I understand, so I normally actually, people who've seen me speak, I don't spend a lot of time behind the mic, but I wanted to get the words just right. So I will have some time in which I've said the words I want to say in the way that I want to say them to move around and free up, but it's why I'm standing here today. While I understand the theme of this dope gathering to be, quote, how today's political landscape has impacted the intersections of race, environment, and social justice, there's another theme or intention that is present. The voice of Black women has been given center stage at this dope gathering, and it is a dope gathering. I want to acknowledge the voices of Black women at this time, in this room, at this moment. Dr. Priscilla McCutcheon, Dr. LaToya Eves, Dr. Rosalind Harris, Dr. Hannah Garth, Dr. Rachel Watkins. Doctor, give me the news, I got a bad case of loving. I want to acknowledge those of you I know and those of you I don't know. I want to acknowledge the Black students in the room. I want to acknowledge those women from the past and those women yet to come. I want to use my full privilege to take a long moment to emphasize the importance of this moment and fantasize about a time when it will be business as usual and the business will look good. And I want to say how the beauty of it is, no one is diminished, no one is left out, no one is erased. The fullness of who we might become is given license to play. With that said, my second shout out goes to Audra Lord and Toni Morrison, who just had their birthday a few days ago, same day, February 18th. Without community, there is no liberation, but community must not mean a shedding of our differences, nor the pathetic pretense that these differences do not exist. You want to fly? You gotta give up the shit that weighs you down. So me first, I want to share some of the shit that weighs me down. So can I say some things? Do we know each other well enough for me to say some things that might change how you think about me? I mean that. Can I talk about all the things that weigh me down to a moment in time in this brown body that some won't see? It is a precarious position to stand apart from institutionalized possibility and potential in an attempt to save one's life. I'm going to say that again. It is a precarious position to stand apart from institutionalized possibility and potential in an attempt to save one's life. And yeah, damn, that was dramatic. But that's what's going on in my head. That's what's going on in my head a lot lately. So here's the tea from me in reference to the theme of how the current political atmosphere has impacted the intersections of race, environment, and social justice. I am tired. Since I last spoke at Dope 2018, Wakanda, I've been asked to speak at 27 places, sometimes as a one-off, sometimes all day, sometimes many days at a time. The geographical context is diverse, but the asks from my hosts usually are not. Here are some of what folks ask me to talk about. Diversity, inclusion, race, and the environment. Outreach, reaching out, skill building, communication, diversity and inclusion. Risk, relevancy, resilience, diversity and inclusion. Broadening our constituency, diversifying our staff, retaining our Black and brown folks, diversity and inclusion. Storytelling as a way in, narratives as a way out, having a conversation. Diversity and inclusion. The past, the present, the future. I'm not complaining, I'm just explaining why I'm tired. Emotional labor is a thing. For the past few months, I've been grappling with the impulse to run. Not sure where I'd be going, because wherever you go, there you are. Incognito is just an aspiration. What would Audre Lorde say? So, I think of us as friends, so let me get a little more specific and personal about what I'm tired of, or tired about, or tired with. Liam Neeson, I'll come back to that. White-splaining, diversity and inclusion, white supremacy, Howard Schultz, the billionaire ex-CEO of Starbucks, and his caffeinated explanation of his potential run for president, and his confident admission that he doesn't see color. A macro invalidation of difference and pain in past and present. I'm tired of that man in the White House. The news every night, all the time, about that man in the White House, drowning out all the other news of need, possibility, and presence in spite of. I'm tired of airports with carpets. What's up with that? I'm tired of the ways my heart wrenches when I think about Jussie Smollett and his use of the noose as a way to validate his presence and demand greater affirmation. I'm tired of the silence, the elephant in the room, the race card, though I thought about going like that for Halloween, you know, like I'd be like the Ace of Spades and I'm tired of appropriation, extraction, and co-optation and the boldness of white supremacy reinscribed. Here's an example of that. One of the sectors I've been asked to speak with is the outdoor retailer industry. This is not necessarily the point of contact that I get excited about, but make no mistake, race, and environment, and social justice definitely intersect here. And this is an $887 billion industry. Green has never been so green. There was a convention twice a year, over 30,000 people attend. Last year I was invited to speak at the one in Denver. You want to talk about white space? I have never seen so much fleece and outdoor gear in one place. Everything from RVs to yoga mats. And here's the thing, it was enticing. Even to me, and that's not how I present, though I admit I do own a fleece jacket. This isn't even my thing, but I found myself holding a watermelon ukulele and making a mental note of how I needed one of these. No, I don't know how to play the ukulele. The point I want to make is that it is seductive, and powerful, and all-consuming, and about consuming. And it is an industry dominated by white privilege and a history of a narrative of the outdoors and the environment that privileges a perspective that is raced and gendered and individualistic and competitive. John Muir may no longer be with us in the flesh, but he is alive and well, peeking out of every booth. Patagonia, North Face, LL Bean, I was a stranger in a strange land. About to get myself a watermelon ukulele. Along with the retailers, you have organizations and companies that work in tandem with the outdoor industry. One of these companies is Camber Outdoors. They've been around since 1996, a national organization that was originally known as the Outdoor Industry Women's Coalition, and they rebranded in 2016. Well, at the recent Winter Outdoor Retailer event, the Camber Executive Director, Deanne Buck, announced it, as she put it, quote, first of its kind, CEO Outdoor Equity Pledge. She invited more than 60 CEOs of brands and nonprofit institutions to the stage to sign a document declaring their intention to improve their diversity and inclusion efforts within their companies and to more directly engage communities of color. As a predominantly white organization that had previously focused specifically on engaging women, this seemed like a bold and right-on-time move. Other CEOs, white, lined up to sign on. A photo was taken. It was a "we got this" kind of moment. Except they didn't. There were a few black and brown folks in the room who lost their minds and started hitting Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. The big problem was that this was not the first of its kind. Diversity and inclusion activist and environmentalist Teresa Baker, a Black woman based in the Bay Area, had circulated a document called the Diversity Pledge, which 23 CEOs had already signed on a year earlier. I know this because I'm one of the folks on the steering committee who has agreed to mentor a CEO around the question of diversity and inclusion. The CEO of Chamber Outdoors also knew this because Teresa had reached out in an effort to collaborate and cooperate, but Dion Buck wasn't having it. So she went ahead and did her own thing, co-opted and re-inscribed and made a comfortable and safe space for other white CEOs to be themselves with their privilege intact. The good news is that Black and brown folks weren't having it because we had Teresa's back through op-eds and a social media storm. Not only did Dion Buck apologize, she resigned. Let's talk some more about erasure. Back in November, I spent 16 days at the University of Vermont working with the Rubenstein School, their all things environmental intellectual playground. While I was there, Ta-Nehisi Coates spoke to a packed house. While he said a number of things I had to write down, my ears perked up and my heart opened when he gave a shout out to Black women writers and authors. He was humble about his own contribution to the majority culture's understanding of Black life with his book, Between the World and Me, for which he had won a MacArthur. He blew up the idea that there is, in his words, that one Black book, end quote, that's supposed to represent Black America. He drove home the point that there are so many Black women who have been writing and talking the tea and are not recognized or affirmed. Still. At the intersection of race, environment, and social justice, I have my own personal story of erasure. I have actually a lot of stories like that. And I want to talk about one of those stories as it relates to an environmental organization considered to be the largest public land-holding organization, stolen land, in the country, with something like $900 million at its fingertips, the Nature Conservancy. So, I can not have to look at my notes for this. So some of you may have heard me tell this story before, and I won't go into it too far to say that I grew up in New York, right outside. My parents were caretakers for a 12-acre estate belonging to a very wealthy Jewish family. Beautiful vegetable gardens, fruit trees, ponds, swimming pool. Father was the chauffeur caretaker, my mom was the housekeeper caretaker. Nearly 50 years on this piece of land. Wealthy white neighborhood. Harry Winston property down the street, Schaefer of Schaefer Beer lived next door. We were the only family of color in that neighborhood until the 1990s when a Japanese-American woman moved in. She was there for a few years and then she moved out. And Mr. Tishman died. In the 90s, Mrs. Tishman got ill. And so the big question of what's going to happen to my parents who've now been on this land at that point for nearly 40 years. And to her credit, she tried to keep them on this land. That property in the 90s was worth over $3 million. The property taxes alone were over $125,000 a year, and my dad had been making about $20,000 a year. So she couldn't keep them on this land. She had a beautiful house built for them in Leesburg, Virginia, which my dad likes to call Leesburg, and that's a side story. On a half an acre of land. She passed away. The new owner came on, and my parents stayed on for another 5 or 6 years because they needed a new family to move into the Gardener's Cottage where we lived before they could leave, and they finally found a family who happened to be from the Dominican Republic. So in 2003, they moved down to their new house, which is quite beautiful. And my dad in particular just got depressed. He got depressed. He talked a lot about the land and missing this place. They then received a letter from one of their neighbors. It was a copy of a letter. An organization called the Westchester Conservation Land Trust had sent a letter to all the neighbors in that surrounding area because a conservation easement had been placed on that piece of property. And a conservation easement means, if it's placed in perpetuity, nothing can be changed. It also means the new owner doesn't have to pay taxes, but that's another thing. So for about a page and a half, it talks about all the environmental values of that property and why it should be protected, the wildlife, where it sits in the watershed, all the kinds of things that are important. And at the end of the letter, it thanks the new owner for his conservation-mindedness. He's been on the land, I think, for 3 years. There's nothing in the letter thanking my parents, who were on that land for 50 years. That's how fast people can be erased. Now, I often tell this story when I go around, and the Nature Conservancy, who's also interested in the idea of diversity and inclusion, had a thing where they invited speakers of color to talk just to the staff. We met at their DC office, and they had satellites so people around the country, Nature Conservancy, could listen to it. And I told this story, and I'm used to telling it. And at the end, during questions, this white man who's part of Nature Conservancy, an older man, very nice man, stood up and said, you know, I think we can do something about that erasure. And I was really moved. I started to cry because nobody's ever said that. He says, we can do an oral history of your parents, right? It was amazing. This was about a little over a year and a half ago. And I started to cry because I was so not used to having somebody say they can do something about it. And I said, well, we have to do it quickly because my dad's Alzheimer's is getting worse. And so myself, this man and another woman, we were back and forth on email and the phone about how we could make it happen. They were going to bring a videographer to my parents' house in Leesburg. I was going to be there. They were going to come up with something. We were haggling over who has ownership over the story. But I was feeling like we could work it out. As they were going back and forth trying to figure out, I guess, who they knew at Westchester Conservation Land Trust and all this going back and forth, it finally came back to me. And they said to me, when they realized that they had no direct hand in the conservation easements being placed on the property, that they couldn't make the case to their higher-ups that they could spend the money to do the oral history of my parents. $900 million. $900 million. You can look it up, it's public, Nature Conservancy. It was a month before I could reply back in email because, you know, my whole thing is about meeting people where they are. But I was like, you're talking about diversity and inclusion, and you aren't really willing to do what you need to do. And I don't blame the two individuals, actually. I blame the institution. And this is where I get frustrated. I should go back to my notes now because who knows what I'll say. Where was I? Yes. I wrote, I am hurt. I am frustrated and disappointed by institutional rigidity that even with good intentions in place, cannot always make room for even the smallest gesture of acknowledgement of the pain caused over and over again. I believe this current moment has made it easier to point to all that is wrong, that has always been wrong in this country, especially when we think about race, environment, and social justice. Glenn Nelson is an Asian American journalist based in Seattle. I've known Glenn for a few years. After working successfully as a journalist in the sports world, he left to write about and disrupt how the outdoor industry and mainstream environmental movement resist race. He says, quote, a lot of us feel we don't count because we're not properly counted, end quote. Makes me think of something I recently heard in the documentary In Search of Greatness. Quote, making something important because we can measure it instead of measuring it because it is important, end quote. What shift has to take place? What intention has to be set? What has to be seen in order to make that shift in political ecology or any field? We are trained to measure what's important, which is in turn determined in part by canons and historical narratives and contemporary expressions of truths, framed and informed by privileged perspectives that aren't necessarily wrong, but are most definitely limited. Privilege has the privilege of not seeing itself. My own preoccupation with blackness in particular, and race in general, is in part tied to something that Salamisha Tillett, who's at University of Pennsylvania, says in her book, Sites of Slavery, Citizenship and Racial Democracy in the Post-Civil Rights Imagination. She says, quote, in the case of African Americans, civic estrangement occurs because they have been marginalized or underrepresented in the civic myths, monuments, narratives, icons, creeds, and images of the past that constitute, reproduce, and promote an American national identity, end quote. I agree 100%. And even still, we cannot be fully erased. Our presence cannot be denied. Maligned, yes. Twisted, yes. Appropriated, yes. Extracted, transacted, yes. Forgotten, yes. But as Toni Morrison says, something that is loved is never lost. So now I'm going to talk about Liam Neeson. I want to talk about Liam. So full transparency, I love Liam Neeson, okay? He's a good actor, good looking. I particularly love the way he channeled his real-life wife's death in the movie The Grey. And if you haven't seen it, it's a powerful performance. And there's a piece in there when somebody's dying, and he talked about it later. I felt it in the recesses of my soul that tries to deny the inevitability of death. I also had this brief moment of flirtation with Liam when I was young and had it going on. I'm not going to tell you about that. So, Liam shares a story on a morning talk show about a time 40 years ago when a woman friend of his, a white woman friend, confides in him that she was raped by a black man. And Liam hits the streets hoping to find a black man to hit and hit and hit with all the fury a friend feels for another friend and all the privilege of a straight white man living in this world. One cannot help but think of his role in Taken when he says to the man on the phone who's kidnapped his daughter, "I will find you and I will kill you." Liam Neeson shared this story and then revealed his long walk on the road back, that road of redemption, that road that is strewn with cutting flints, where one tries to right their wrongs and simply be better. The general response has been a familiar one of righteous anger, I get it, and a washing one's hands of this particular human being. We're done with him. He's out. Accountability, one might say. And yes, I think people need to be held accountable. But let me tell you a different story. Alice Walker, who is most famously known for writing the book The Color Purple, wrote a nonfiction book entitled The Same River Twice, which came out in 1996, about 10 years or so after Steven Spielberg brought The Color Purple to life on the silver screen. I love the book. The film made me angry for a number of different reasons, but I've grown to appreciate it over time. That's a longer conversation. Alice starts the book The Same River Twice in this way, quote, "I belong to a people so wounded by betrayal, so hurt by misplacing their trust, that to offer us a gift of love is often to risk one's life, certainly one's name and reputation. I belong to a people, heart and mind, who do not trust mirrors, not those in any case in which we ourselves appear." End quote. If you know the story of The Color Purple, the primary male character, played by Danny Glover, was named Mr. And Mr. was physically and emotionally abusive to women, particularly those he was married to. It's brutal to read and imagine, and it's brutal to watch on the big screen. When the film came out, Alice was deluged by hate mail from black people who felt betrayed, miscast, cast out. Alice fell into a deep depression, and also, unbeknownst to her at that moment, she fell ill with Lyme disease. Imagine what it must have felt like to receive messages of hate from those you love most in the world. I belong to a people so wounded by betrayal, so hurt by misplacing their trust, that to offer us a gift of love is often to risk one's life, certainly one's name and one's reputation. In 2005, I was ostensibly working on my dissertation in Atlanta. All you grad students know that thing. So I was living in Atlanta because my community partner was there, and I was pretending I was working on my dissertation. I think I spent 3 months just staring at the screen and doing other things. And I know you all know what I'm talking about. And I had become friends with Valerie Boyd, who's a black writer and a professor at the University of Georgia. She is also going to be the first black biographer of Zora Neale Hurston in her book Wrapped in Rainbows, which is amazing. And she is friends with Alice Walker. So in 2005, Oprah was producing The Color Purple for Broadway. And Valerie and her partner got invited, and she said to me, do you want to go to New York? I didn't even get out of her mouth entirely. I was like, yes. Dissertation, what's that? So we went to see The Color Purple on Broadway on opening night. I mean, I was starstruck all over the place because everybody was there. When Sidney Poitier walked by me, I thought I was going to die. It was a fine moment. But at the end of the performance, which was really magnificent, first Oprah got on stage. And, you know, Oprah, in terms of the way that she shares, was she talked about the time she starred in the movie, and she kind of talked about her experience of Color Purple. And then she invited Alice Walker on the stage. And when Alice Walker got on the stage, she didn't say one word about herself. She wanted to remind everybody in the room that this was a story about redemption. and for us to focus on that in terms of human beings, being human beings. What did I write here? When Alice got the stage, she didn't talk about herself, she talked about the primary point of the story, redemption and love, that we all can be redeemed. But the true beauty of the story is how Mr. is redeemed, how he is not simply cast out forever, that we are all freed when redemption becomes possible. So that brings me to the last thing I want to talk about. So I want to go back to the theme the DOPE committee shared with me, how today's political landscape has impacted the intersections of race, environment, and social justice. I believe that along with the need to recognize and break down the specificity of the case studies that you all have shared these past 2 days, the uniqueness of history and timing and relationship and meaning that makes up a place and a people and a moment, this work really points to the question of freedom. Theirs, mine, and ours. What does it look like? What does it require? What does freedom need? I think it's always been about freedom. We talk about power and privilege, and yes, it is important to identify and call out and disrupt if we can, and we must. But what is the larger goal? What is that thing we don't say, but it lurks behind every research question, methodological choice, every theoretical supposition that we strive for, that we believe, that we are driven to do? What is it that we want? If there's anything about this moment that strikes me, it is the disruption of the status quo. And when I say status quo, I mean the silence, denial, conformity, and assimilation that bleeds into all that we do around difference and particularly race. Toni Morrison says, quote, how to be free and situated, how to convert a racist house into a race-specific yet non-racist home, how to enunciate race while depriving it of its legal claim. I ask the question, can we be free and situated? Can I be both free and situated? From an academic perspective, I've been stuck in it for a while, finding freedom. My work has been about whose story counts, the invisible, the space between the words, the marginalized, the not canon, the me too and not that me too, the caucasity that threatens to drown out our possibility and take us all out, the study of the right language and the right way to know. I spent so much time focused on that powerful other that I forgot why I was doing this in the first place. I am trapped by the bonds of my own making, and no wonder I am tired. I was speaking at a gathering of informal science educators in Lockwood, Texas earlier this week. Rockford was one of the places hardest hit by Hurricane Harvey in 2017. The live oaks that died at the camp where we stayed were a little worse for the wear. The educators were from around the state. They worked in colleges and universities, museums and aquariums, and outdoor spaces. They invited me to speak because as I understood it, they were asking about engaging beyond their own borders. Not just their organization or institution, but the borders of their own minds and bodies trapped by the bonds of their own making. After my talk, one of the few black women in the room, and there were 4, including me, came up to me afterwards and in a moment of deep emotion, frustration, sadness, anger, she proceeded to tell me about her experience of what she called black-on-black racism. How black people challenged her love of the outdoors, of her presence in a present that still reeked of past pain that has not yet been addressed. Did I ever experience this? What did I think about this? Now I hesitated then and I hesitate right now to have this conversation in mixed company, lest it be interpreted as a way to deny whiteness its due. But she was quite courageous in speaking in front of others, so the least I could do was meet her where she stood. So I said, yes, and proceeded to share some stories from my past while also letting her know that age has some perks. There's a kind of centering of self that can happen like a superpower. Wakanda. But I also shared how that internalized oppression keeping me from my freedom lurks at the edges still. I told the story about being in Baltimore a few weeks back. I had spent the day at Towson University and some faculty took me out to dinner. We went to Ida B's Table, a black-owned establishment that served some soul food with a West African twist that I was told was very popular. I had these amazing oxtails and black pepper sauce that makes you want to slap your mama and throw your shoes at the chef. Good. So the 6 of us rolled in, 5 white faculty and me, and sat down. I love the vibe of the place. It's open, it's comfortable, it's friendly. And when I looked at the menu, I knew it was on. The actor Danny Glover was sitting at the next table with his friends, so this must be the place. Well, I had a great time, and I had a great time. Good conversation and amazing food, though my good manners meant that I could not suck on the bones the way I wanted. What lurked underneath was this old feeling. I noticed that everyone else in the restaurant was black, and I was the only black person at a table full of white people. And for a fleeting moment, I felt my confidence, my sense of blackness, of self, slip. Recently, I had the privilege of hearing Dr. Damaris Hill, a professor here at UK, speak about her new book, A Bound Woman is a Dangerous Thing, the Incarceration of African American Women from Harriet Tubman to Sandra Bland. So much of her work is powerful, but the piece that hit me hard was when Dr. Hill talked about freedom and which of the women in her mind had truly attained that freedom. For her, it was Assata Shakur and Harriet Tubman. Not only were they able to get themselves free, but they got others free, and then they were able to enjoy and sit in that freedom. For those of you whom this work is more than an intellectual exercise, or it is a choice to reveal, to disrupt, to reinstate, and yes, to destroy, because in destruction, new possibility emerges, how do we stay true to the task? How do we resist the path set before us and instead carve a new one? How are we free? How are we, as Alice Walker says, rendered whole? So I really want to end now, but with one short story. And this piece is unfinished, and I was hoping I would finish it in time for the day, but I didn't. But I want to just read a little piece of it. In terms of self-care, I began writing a piece called The Preamble to Freedom, Legacies of Love. I got the term Legacies of Love from the independent scholar Alexis Pauline Gumbs. She got me thinking about all the people and the moments that I am grateful for and tell me who I am and what is possible, not just for me, but for us all. So I want to end with a story about my mother. She did not bear me, but she raised me. I often talk about my father when talking about erasure and presence and pain associated with race and land and place, but my mother was and is always there, in the shadows and in the light. So can I say some things? My mother can't hear me. She's lost 50% of her hearing, and when we talk on the phone, it is an exercise in futility. When I'm at an airport, and I'm always at an airport, I imagine those around me feeling my frustration as I repeat for the 3rd time, "Did you get the package I sent?" And she responds, "Your father is fine." I try to resist sighing. She can't help her hearing loss. But then I remember she can't hear me anyway, so I sigh. My mother can't hear me. As far as I got. And the reason I wanted to start with that story because, I come from a family, we are not touchy-feely, we do not share what is intimate, what is vulnerable, what is most me, we just don't. When I had to learn about how babies are born, we were given the life cycle library. Anybody old enough to remember what it is, it's a set of books. Read, learn, now you know. So we don't talk about anything personal. Most of you who know me know that my parents said they couldn't have kids, and my mother in particular, because like a lot of women, poor women, regardless of the color of their skin in the 50s, she'd gone to the doctor and she was told she had a cyst on one of her ovaries and they need to remove that cyst. And so when she went in to get it removed, but when she woke up, they told her that they had just removed one of her ovaries. And the reason they didn't ask her permission is because they didn't think she could handle the information. So because of that, she didn't think she could have any children. So she and my father adopted me, so I won. And then 2 years later, I was saying like they relaxed and I had my first brother, and then they relaxed some more and had the second brother. So I always knew, even though we didn't have intimate conversations, I always knew that I was adopted, but they made sure it was not a big secret in the house. And I remember at a time when I was maybe 6 or 7, and my brother who was 2, we were playing, and because brothers and sisters, we were fighting, and my brother looked at me with Brother Greg and said, "They don't love you as much because you're adopted," right? And they overheard that, and he never said that again. But that's it. And then there would be kind of they joke around that my biological mother is definitely somebody famous. It could be Diana Ross, like we had this conversation. It was always somebody famous. And up until maybe 10 years ago, my aunt swore my father was Colin Powell. That's real. But that's the most. I never, for me, identity, that's why I like to do the work, is the idea of belonging, who am I, the eternal human question. But more than that, we didn't talk about it, because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. I was doing my own search, but they raised me, they loved me, they did the best that I could. I'm grateful for that. In the 90s, when I was doing all that backpacking, I lived in Nepal for about 1.5 years, and for all of you younger folks, no cell phone, no email, you wrote letters. They took 3 weeks to get to where they needed to go. And I would always be excited when the mail came in. And so this is how I communicate to my parents. I sent them postcards and letters. But there was a point when I was there, being really inward thinking and thoughtful, I got pretty depressed about who am I, Because the eternal question for some folks who are adopted is, I'm never good enough, it's sort of a driver. And I've had that conversation with other adoptees. And I was just in my own place with it, not really sharing it with anyone. Well, my mother, who does not like to write letters, it was weird, so she just doesn't. She'll send a card before she'll send a letter. She sends me a letter, and all she had put in it was a clipping, and it was a clipping from a newspaper. It was like the version of an Ann Landers column. And the column was about someone who was adopted, who was making the point that when you are adopted, you are gifted with 2 mothers and 2 possibilities. And it was just this little thing that beautifully written about that. That's all she said. I still haven't talked about it to her to this day, because how did she know that? How did she know that? We were thousands of miles apart. We never had this conversation, and somehow she knew that I needed to know. And so this is where I want to end. With Angela Davis, actually. Oh, that's my mother. I meant to have that up there when I said that. So I want to end with 2 quotes from Angela Davis. And I was going to pick one, but it's Angela Davis, and I didn't have to pick one. Right. So the first one is, I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept. But the other one is, you have to act as if it were possible to change the world. And you have to do it all the time. Thank you. Really, y'all? I just laid some stuff out. It got personal up in this joint. Don't be shy. All questions and comments are good. No one's leaving.
words to say to, yeah, I'm Mary Longman. Thanks. Now I gotta pause a second. Yeah. We were gonna say a few things to some of the young Black graduate students here trying to find their way through this process, deal with the institutional stuff. Very big and open one, but I wanted to maybe make a space if you could put a few words towards that.
Oh, you know I don't have anything to say about that. Sorry. It's hot. Woo. That's a great question, Mary. Thank you. Well, some of them who know me know I've said it before, right? So when I say this actually to all students, you know, what's your intention, really? I've said it 100 times. So because this wasn't a first choice for me to go back to school, because I had another focus and a place that I was standing, it meant what helped me with that was that I wasn't looking for myself in an academic setting, and I wasn't looking for it to define who I am. I also had an older friend, I still do, she's half Lakota, half African American, in her 70s, I've known her for 30 years, who has a very diverse, rich, and incredible background in work that she's been doing her whole life, who said to me, you know, what is your intention? What is this in service to? If you are making a choice to pursue graduate work, to pursue further work in academia, for me it's not about it being bad or good, and when you talk about all the ways that I feel the institution is challenged, every single institution in this country is challenged, so good luck. You know, for me that's not even useful. For me the question is, what do you want to do with it? Why are you there? What is it asking of you, that thing you want to do? That's, for me, it comes back to the idea of freedom. How are we free to be more than we think we are, right? So if you know what that is, then you're able and willing to do what it is you need to do. It is not being easy, because it's not going to be easy. You're in an institution that's rigid, because all the institutions, in my opinion, are rigid, right? It's not going to be easy. It's not about being comfortable. So many of us never live our life in comfort. If you want comfort, there's other things you can choose. But that doesn't mean it won't be exciting. That doesn't mean you won't be privileged. That doesn't mean you can't feel joy. That doesn't mean you can't build relationship. That doesn't mean you can't be better. You just need to be clear about what it is you want to do. Know that. Find the people in your life who remind you of that. When I was going through all of that at Berkeley over my tenure, not getting it, 3 years, it nearly did me in. It was people calling me up, people I didn't know, people I knew. Nikki Finney, who used to be a professor here, a fabulous black poet, fabulous poet who's black, who said to me, remember who you are. Remember who you are. So sometimes that means it takes some time, because you have to figure out, do you know who you are? I'm still working on it. Like I'm 29. I'm not 29. In my mind. So that's what I would say. It's just, I mean, there's other things I could say, but for me that would be the most important thing. That was the moment. See, Rachel, we had this thing going that if I didn't have the right ending, I was going to go, and she was going to hit some music, and there was going to be a song.
I have it. I decided on, even before you started speaking, Adventures in Paradise, Minnie Riperton.
Oh!
So, yes, thank you for this. Thank you so much. Question for someone who's not a graduate student, but for people who are on the path that I'm on. So I have been a tenured professor for some time, and I know there are a lot of people in my cohort. I don't know that it's the same for people who are in cohorts that come after. But a lot of us are really struggling in all sorts of ways with being situated and being free. And it's really fascinating to me how difficult, kind of going back to that question about do you know who you are, you know, what's your intention, how difficult it is for us to individually and collectively let go to do what it is we need to do. And you have done that, and we know it's not easy. You've done it. I want to honor that. And also want to know if you have something that you want to say to me and my cohort in terms of how we proceed with moving forward on our terms, being situated in free. I mean, and I think, and I'm also asking that knowing that we don't get to kind of talk and confer with people in my cohort in the same way the cohorts after, because we were kind of taught in this way to look up to our advisors or what have you, and not to establish these horizontal networks that we like to nurture among our students. So,
Dang.
should I just like put the music on?
That was a great question, I feel. So this is one of those challenging moments as somebody who's chosen to stand outside in a different relationship with the academy. I actually am working with quite a number of institutions, so I'm not gone. It's just that I had to pivot in a certain way for that. And it's difficult because I'm not interested in diminishing anybody else's choice. I'm not interested in diminishing, period, right? Especially in order to make myself feel more affirmed for where I stand. So I had to think about that a little bit. I'm kind of impulsive on some things because I go by feeling first. Think about it later. And so there's something about, so here's the thing. You know, people have heard me say it's all about the risk we're willing to take in order to gain something, not the risk we're willing to take in order not to lose something, right? And what that actually means is the risk is going to, it's risk. They don't call it risk, it just means something's going to get lost in there. Position, relationship, work, affirmation. This isn't meant for you to feel sorry for me, but it's what popped in my head. That one of the hardest things for me is I don't get any awards from academic anything. I get no acknowledgement. I get no affirmation. I get none. People come to me all the time, so I'm busy, so that's the affirmation. And so part of it is, where are you looking for the affirmation, right? And so how do you shift it? Because the willingness, it'd be great, and you might be able to still get everything, but it's really coming back to what is it that you want to do and what you're able to risk. You have tenure, so within the system, that's supposed to mean that now you have a certain kind of freedom. I know. I'm supposed to, in bold, underlined, 100 times, and heavy quotes, and I get it. But that's what it's supposed to mean. Well, you know, and the way that I am is to make it mean it. Because you have to really test the borders. There's no way around this. There's no way for me. There's no way to get where you want to go, situated and free, without challenging that very thing where you are. There's no way to go. You can't go back, you can't get out, you're in it. And that's the point, because all of this stuff is history embedded over and over. And it's unfair that some of us have to do more of the work than others because of our obvious differences, right? It's unfair, but for me it is true. So then I have to think of who can support me, who can have, words like allies are so overused, but you know, those relationships where, you know, who's got my back? And then finding out sometimes even when they did, they don't, because they don't know how to, not because they're bad people, because they don't know how to have your back. And I do believe in when you start doing that, people pay attention. You know, I don't know what else to say beyond that. There's something about it. I mean, you know the particulars of where you are and what it is you can and cannot do. And I always say, I look at the things that says that if I cannot do them, then I have to interrogate why. And that thing that where's Angela? You know, the other quote, the things I cannot change, I'm gonna try to change it. That's the place where a lot of us have to stand. We have to stand. I feel like that's what it's called for. Sorry.
You know, I just think that there's a lot of time, and it should be spent giving advice to, you know, people who are on the path or just starting out. And I mean, it's something. There's something to be said for they're having all of these conversations kind of being foreclosed, and a lot of like non-communication going on, and having to have conversations with yourself. And so mean, I was really asking to just kind of put it out there in the atmosphere because it doesn't happen.
And a lot of faculty in the room will probably not agree with me when I said it. I said it years ago, and I'd say it again to every student in the room. You know, in my experience, it's like this hierarchy. And it's this thing, and you understand, you're told to understand your role as a student of one of learning and possibility, but here's what you have to do, and you better do it like this. And there's something interesting and good about discipline and rigor and recognition of a history of a discipline, to know what that is and come at it. It's a skill set, it's an important tool. I got it too. I got multiple degrees, I get it, and I'm glad I have it. It's a privilege to have it. I can draw on that. But the thing is, what you have to bring, none of us have it. I don't want you to copy me. Boring. Being you, which means it is your job to articulate who you are and what you have to bring with the tools given to you. And yes, there are going to be some people in power who won't get it. Find somebody else, because this world is filled with millions and billions of people. That's the job. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself, if you're still worried about this sort of thing, down the line with the job, the promotion, and you're going to be asking that same question over and over again, wondering when is the right moment that I can ask without the risk. There isn't any. It doesn't exist. It's how you deal with the risk now. And there are people who will say, I don't know what you're doing, but I like what you're doing. And I can use my position of power to make sure you can do that and get what you're like. Just looking at you because you're giving me good vibes. Yeah.
Hi.
What's your name?
Megan. Thank you so much for
What's your name?
Megan.
Megan, sorry.
Yeah. Your words are always such a gift. It's very lovingly received too, so thank you. I have a question about black faces, white spaces. And if you had all the time in the world, 5 years later, do you ever have any thoughts on like anything you'd add on to it in a second edition, or?
Are you kidding me?
No.
The answer, Megan, is yes. Next. Yeah, I wasn't, this is always weird, I'm one of those people, just like probably a lot of people in this room, that have always loved books. I was a total book nerd when I was a kid. So the idea of writing a book was like, ooh, it's a book. And so I was completely underwhelmed by my book. In part because it came off a dissertation, which isn't the way I wanted to do it, but it's the way it came out. In part because I was in a tenure-track job that needed me to get it out. So all the, and all my own insecurities, and it was like getting it to where it needed to go. Then it became a point of I just have to get it out because it has to be published in time in order for X, Y, and Z to happen. So that part of it, that's why the next book for me I call it creative nonfiction, because I want to do it exactly how I want to do it, and it's not reliant on the potential of a job or job promotion for it. Having said that, there were so many stories I didn't tell in there. There were so many people who I met who shared their lives with me that I couldn't talk about. I thought the way that I tried to, the publisher understood, when I first was doing the book, they said, you've got two voices here. There's the academic voice, and there's the public voice. I have an idea. Why don't we do two, they said this in the beginning, why don't we do two versions? We'll do the academic one, and like the penguin, he said the penguin, copy version. And my first thought was like, oh, that's so cool! Then I thought about that shit for 5 minutes. I was like, what? No way. So it was kind of rough how I tried to pull it together. I would love to, there's a better way that I could have done it. I mean, it was my first attempt at what does it mean sort of to be true to the voice that I wanted to bring in there, but also to honor the academic history of my getting to a point where I had the academic confidence to feel that I could do it. Because I actually, back in the 90s, when I was doing a backpacking, I got a ton of journals. That's what I was going to do, was write. And the big reason I did this is because I didn't have the confidence. So instead, I had to go back and get 3 degrees to get there. So there's something about that. I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, so I like it.
Hi, my name is Aria Bird. And first I want to say thank you so much for like feeding you right now.
I'm crying because I'll cry, you know, get ready.
I'm a crier, so.
Okay, I'm crying. Seeing you up there and acknowledging the African American women was something that I've never experienced before. And so, first I want to say thanks. My second question is, I recognize your unapologeticness of like being you as an African American woman. And you mentioned before that, you know, you were still trying to figure it out, like you were 29, and I am 29, I'm trying to figure it out now. So my question for you is, have you always been this way? Is this innate in you, or was there a moment where you found your voice, you know, your unique voice and who you are, and to stood proudly in that? Wow. That's some deep shit. I have to look up. I'm looking for help. Help? Ancestors somewhere. So I'm going to go back to, because I always knew that I was adopted. I can tell you the driver was always clear. You know, we live in a country where movies, we live in a country where we say things like blood is thicker than water, where in comedies when one brother is making a joke to his sister, says, oh, they don't love you, you're adopted, you must be adopted, you're so strange. So that is always clear in me, this sense of I don't know who I am or where I've come from, therefore I'm not good enough. So the driver to be who I am has always been there. I don't think I've always been true to that. Yesterday, and I can't remember who did it on your panel, probably you, Rachel, but the journey of black women's hair. Yes, right? Because I had that too, right? And so part of it, I remember, you know, this was the 60s, but I had 2 little pigtails, and I wanted straight hair. It's like a boring, familiar story, but I wanted straight hair, and I wanted to do, you know, Whoopi Goldberg to say, put it on, I would move, and my hair would do this. And so when I finally at 9 asked my mom, I said, can you straighten my hair for me? Because she used to hot comb on hers, and you could buy this relaxers chemical to put in your hair. And she knew that it wasn't going to come out like I thought it was, but she couldn't convince me otherwise. So she did it. And of course, when my hair came out, it was still pretty much my hair. It didn't look all that different. So then I said, cut it all off. Right, I want them. And she was like, are you sure? And I was like, Angela does it. I can, yes, off. Right. So that afro for me, and I kept it until I was about a senior in high school, and then other things happened. But those attempts, the driver to figure out who I am and assert it. But I always have to be like pushed to the edge. And there were moments when, you know, I would say there's still moments actually. You know, it's the biggest fear for me is not belonging and losing membership. So even in walking away from the academy, the sense of isolation I've felt since then is strong. But people don't see that because it's not, I'm a very optimistic, fairly happy human being. But I'm also, I feel isolated, right? It's a weird kind of isolation that's self-imposed. So there's always these challenges for me to say, who am I and how can I reassert myself all the time for myself? It's a practice. I wouldn't say that there's any one moment. I think it's just a practice. It's like the attention to that. And understanding nothing is static. So even though I've had my dreadlocks way too long, man, since 1994, I know I need to change them, but so even though some things don't change, a lot of other things do change, right? And so how am I open to what that is and those possibilities of something else that I might become? I guess it's the best I can say. It's a hard and good question. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Hi. What's your name?
My name is Chris. Let's do that. I I was curious, because you mentioned you've been to Nepal,
Yes.
and the role that I think is often restricted from African Americans is travel, and the ways in which it can be transformative. And like one of the things that my mom told me, she said like, and I grew up with like class privilege, and she said, if we make it, like I want you to be able to travel and get out and see the world and get cultured or whatever, and be able to I don't know, try to learn a new language. And I was curious about like your thoughts on travel as well, and kind of unrelated, but just how that impacted and influenced you to blend art into your academic endeavors as well.
Thank you. Actually, it's not unrelated, because I'm at the center of art and travel. I mean, we all are at the center of our own lives, that's all I know. Not like I'm at the center of the world. Thank you, Chris. That was a good question, what I heard you say. So, and I'm always caught in this moment. So, at a personal, human level of that we are all drawn to things and people and places, and we can't always articulate why that is. There was something about, back in the 80s, I mean, people have heard me tell this story, but back in my younger days, I was married for a little while. Things weren't working out. So in the late 80s, my ex-husband and I said, why don't we backpack, save our money, and backpack around the world? Because that will save the marriage. It didn't. But, so we saved our money, and we spent 6 months, and this is what we did. And that moment for me, that's one of those, if you have your moments in your life that blew open the door for me on everything, like about myself, things I didn't like, things I did. But I love the feeling of movement. There was movement for me that I don't know what it is. I think really well if I'm moving. There was something about being placed in places where they were unfamiliar that forced me to let go of ideas of myself and others much more quickly than if I stood in a place I knew and tried to do that same work. There's something about finding out where my edges are. And again, if you're in somewhere that you don't know, with people you don't know, with a language you don't know, with food you don't know, your edges, man, they get really clear. And then being able to make a decision whether or not I wanted to cross those edges. And so discovering my own agency and what that is. There's something just really sweet about, that world, that movie, the first one, Al Gore, Truth. Inconvenient Truth. Yes, that one. And Inconvenient Truth. I'm not going to say anything, there wasn't anything about the movie, but what moves me when I watch that movie, the only thing that moves me in that movie is the scene where they show, I know I just said that like that, is when the camera moves out and it shows the earth and it just, it's almost like 30,000. I was so surprised that I got so affected by the idea of imagining where we live. Like where we live, not just here, but here, and what that is. And so there's something about travel that does that for me. Now, travel is problematic. It's problematic carrying an American passport. It's problematic being black. It's problematic being a woman. It's problematic having more money than a lot of the places you go to and the people who live there. It can be problematic with a privileged perspective and you are still a good person. What does that tension look like? It's problematic when nobody invited you, you just went because you can. It's problematic because we turned it into programs that people can go abroad to do the research and you weren't invited, but we do it anyway because we're good people and we have good intention. All of that is problematic. And I've met wonderful people who have invited me back. I don't think it's one or the other. It's about figuring out how to stand in that truth and being honest with what that is. Why do you want to go? What are you going to do when you get there? We're human beings before everything else. We're human beings. And that doesn't mean we get to bypass all the privileges. It's just remembering that. And there's something really powerful, and I don't mean to romanticize it, but meeting another human being who is not you in a place that is not yours. And for them to welcome you in that generosity of spirit that doesn't need a language, but you know what it is, and there is a recognition. And I wish everybody could have that just once. Because I think take that back into your everyday life is a really powerful thing. There was another question, I was getting emotional. What is your records?
Going into, did travel help impact, or did you always find like artistic tendencies, or do you feel like the movement and the sort of cross-cultural exchange and just the ways in which and the practice that you incorporate art into your everyday life?
Chris,
yeah.
I am an artistic tendency. Yes. Yes. I always say to people, I've always said, I stand, my heart is in the arts, the humanities, because that's where I've always been. I mean, ever since I was small, so I love, you know, acting, improvisation, and poetry, and all that stuff, and music. If I had my one wish, it was that I had a great singing voice, and I could communicate that way, you know. So I love that space. So leaving that would be literally like leaving a part of myself just to do this other thing, whatever that other thing is. I can't do it. So instead of fighting that, I've been always looking for ways to integrate it more. So this comes back to Aria's question about how the practice of bringing myself in a room and knowing who I am. Part of that practice is I have to bring the art in. Otherwise, I just left a big chunk of who I am at home, and I don't want to do that. So yeah, that's the short answer. Thanks.
I don't think we have time for another question. I think some people out there might be needing to use the room. I think there's another event.
Yeah, I'm teasing you, Stefani.
Okay.
Oh, one more. One more you said?
It's okay.
No?
It's okay. Okay, good. Thank you.
You mentioned a minute ago that sometimes we don't know how to have your back. How can we have your back?
Oh, Lord. Okay, we're done. I don't think I can answer that question without giving up too much of myself. I mean, that's a harder.
Maybe instead, know that some of us want to have it.
No one said that some of you do. I mean, I know that already. And how do you have each other's back, actually? What does that look like? You know, I'm just one person, but there's a lot of people in this room who I know are trying to do their work, we're trying to be whole, rendered whole, we're trying to be seen, who are asking over and over again to be affirmed. Sometimes they're not saying it out loud, but they're saying it, you know. So that's, I guess, what I would say. If your voice it off me, puts it over you. That's very...
Hi, my name is Nate.
Dave?
Nate.
Nick?
Nate. Yeah, third time. So this question is not for me. It's for two children that I used to teach. So one is a black boy and the other is a black girl. And they're reaching an age in 6th grade and 7th grade where things are getting much more complicated for them. And the boy he's starting to fail. And I think it's mostly because of the system. And he said something to his sister. She said, oh, there was this boy, and he just kept like touching me. He just kept touching me. And he said, and she was like, it was a joke though. And he said, you can't let them touch you like that. And something about that just really moved me. And as, you know, as a white guy who's his teacher, who sees him, you know, rarely, when I can, when I have time, and the time, you know, is hard sometimes. But what can I do for them? And it can be like a simple act. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't have to be like,
yeah,
you know, just like a simple act.
So let me just make sure I heard you right. Is that what I heard you say was that the young black woman was touching the girl in order for her to understand this is not how she should let anybody else touch her?
No.
Yeah.
There was a boy, okay, I'm sorry, so maybe I wasn't clear. This boy in her class who was touching her.
Oh, there was another boy?
Yeah, and okay. He's like, please, you cannot let anyone
The young black boy was protecting the young black girl.
Yes, it was sister. Yeah.
It was back in the fall when I was spent 16 days at the University of Vermont, at the Rubenstein School. One of the faculty her thing is, I want to say, wildlife ecology. And one of the things she does, she works with one of the public schools in Burlington. In Burlington, even though Vermont is the second whitest state in the country, because of the growing immigrant population, they've got all this new ethnic and racial diversity within Burlington proper. So they have all that showing up in the public schools there. And so one of the things that she does, she takes her graduate and undergraduate students, and they go in and they mentor and they spend time with these elementary school kids of various backgrounds. And so that day that I came in, she asked me to come there and, you know what, I can come into a room with all kinds of people, but I'm going to be most intimidated if you ask me to speak to little kids. Because I was telling somebody, the most honest people are little kids and dogs. They decide whether they like you immediately, and you know it. So I was really nervous, so we got into the gymnasium, and I sat in the back. They don't need to know who I am, I'm just observing, right? And they're playing, and they're doing all these games with these kids, and finally they get in a big circle, and they're like, Carolyn, come on over and introduce yourself. And I'm completely like, shit, like I had that moment. And there were 3 black kids in that group of maybe 25 other kids in the room. And it was one of the kids, I was like, so any questions? Like, I was trying to be all goofy. And one of them asked me this, did I have any pets? And I said, well, I don't, I want a dog, his name's gonna be Mojo, but you know what, my first pet, and I started telling the story about a duck, and it's a funny story, but. And I was telling this whole story, and then somebody asked me another story, what's my favorite color? And that day I was wearing, getting to the answer, just to stay with me. And I was in all blue, and I got it, and it's blue, I was like, what is it? And I was just kind of doing the whole thing. Later, one of the teachers were all white. And one of them took me aside later and he said, oh, that was great, but sorry, no, that's not what I'm saying. She said, but the 3 black kids were glued to looking at me. She said, I just saw them lean in and stop what they were watching. And so what I think it is, how do you, Alice Walker was talking about that mirror. What is the mirror for them? How can you help putting that mirror in front of who they are so they can know who they are and have that affirmed? And that, for you as a teacher, I don't know if that's bringing people in, or the stories you read, or the photos you show, or what you share with them, but it's putting that mirror up in front of them over and over again. So to say, this is who you are, it's like amazing, and underscoring that. Does that make sense? That's our job.
Time for any more questions.
Wine time.
So sorry we have to cut that short, but thank you again, Dr. Finney. And thank you to our other speakers, Dr. Priscilla McCutcheon, Dr. Latoya Eve, Dr. Hannah Garr, Dr. Rachel Watkins, Dr. Roslyn Harris. Thank you to our speakers on our Scholar Activist panel, Dr. Christine Smith, Ron Thomas, Mitzi Sinha, and Dr. Christina Wilkinson. Official end of DOPE 2019. Please join us next year at DOPE 2020, where we'll be celebrating DOPE's 10th anniversary. And don't forget that tonight at 7:30, there's an after party at Al's Bar and Beer Garden, which is located at 601 North Limestone. So thank you again for attending DOPE 2019.